As the silence between us stretched thin, the weight of the moment pressed down on me. His gaze held mine, unwavering, and for a fleeting second, I felt like the world had stopped spinning. This wasn't just Taehyung standing before me, it was a man stripped of all pretenses, offering me a fragile piece of himself I wasn't sure I could accept. But deep down, I knew the truth. I had never truly let him go. I stared at him, my heart warring with my head. This wasn't the Taehyung I remembered, the man who had been so confident, so sure of himself. This Taehyung was raw, exposed, and painfully sincere. But I couldn't let myself fall into his orbit again. Not when I just started piecing my life back together. I can't, I said, shaking my head. I can't go through that again. He reached out, his fingers brushing against mine. The touch was light, tentative, as if he was afraid I'd pull away. I'm not asking for forever, he said. Just, give me tonight. His words were a challenge, a plea, and a temptation all rolled into one. The rational part of me screamed to say no, to walk out of that room and never look back. But the part of me that still ached for him, that still remembered the way he made me feel, faltered. One night, I said finally, my voice barely above a whisper. His lips curved into a small, relieved smile. That's all I need. The music shifted to a softer melody, and without another word, Taehyung took my hand and pulled me into his arms. I didn't resist. We moved together in the small space, our bodies swaying to the rhythm of the music. His hands rested on my waist, firm yet gentle, and I placed mine on his shoulders, trying to ignore the way my heart pounded against my ribs. For a moment, it felt like the world outside that room didn't exist. There was no debt, no pain, no history, only the two of us, caught in a fragile bubble of stolen time. You still feel the same, he murmured, his voice low and intimate. Don't, I whispered, my eyes closing as I fought against the emotions threatening to consume me. Don't make this harder than it already is. Taehyung's grip on my waist tightened slightly, and I felt him lean in, his breath warm against my ear. Then stop running from me, Jungkook. Before I could respond, he pulled back just enough to meet my gaze. His eyes searched mine, and for a moment, I saw everything he'd been holding back, the regret, the longing, the love he hadn't stopped feeling. And before I knew it, his lips were on mine, soft yet insistent, breaking down the last of my defenses. I knew I should push him away, but instead, I found myself clinging to him, pouring every ounce of my anger, my hurt, and my lingering desire into that. Because for tonight, just tonight, I let myself forget. Taehyung's lips lingered on mine as they opened, his hold on me firm yet tender. For a fleeting moment, I allowed myself to surrender, to let the tidal wave of emotions wash over me. But as the music faded into silence, reality clawed its way back, bringing with it the sharp sting of everything we'd left unsaid. I pulled away, my chest heaving as I put some distance between us. Taehyung didn't try to stop me this time, though the look in his eyes told me he wanted to. This doesn't change anything, I said, my voice trembling as I wiped at my lips, as if erasing the evidence of what we just shared could undo the feelings bubbling to the surface. It doesn't have to, he replied, his voice calm, but his gaze burned with an intensity that made it hard to breathe. But don't tell me you didn't feel it, Jungkook. Don't lie to yourself. His words struck a chord I didn't want to acknowledge, and I turned away, hoping the physical distance would make it easier to think. It didn't. Taehyung, We are not the same people we were before, I said, running a hand through my hair. You can't just waltz back into my life and expect everything to fall into place. I do not expect it to, he said, stepping closer but keeping enough distance to avoid overwhelming me. I know I have to earn back your trust, but I need you to let me try. I wanted to believe him, to let his words seep into the cracks of my broken resolve, but the scars he'd left ran too deep. You're not hearing me, I said, my frustration bubbling to the surface. I can't go through this again. I won't, then don't, he said simply, his voice steady yet filled with quiet determination. Let me carry the weight this time. Let me prove to you that I'm not going anywhere. I laughed bitterly, shaking my head. You make it sound so easy, but it's not. You don't get to rewrite the past, Taehyung. You don't get to erase the pain you caused. He flinched, the first crack in his confident demeanor appearing as he let out a soft sigh. You're right. I can't change the past. But I can fight for our future. If you let me. His words hung in the air, heavy with sincerity, and I hated how much they affected me. Before I could respond, he closed the distance between us, his hand brushing against my cheek. I stiffened at the contact, but I didn't pull away. Jungkook, he said softly, his thumb tracing a gentle line along my jaw. You don't have to forgive me now. You don't even have to believe me. Just let me stay. Let me show you that I'm not the same man who let you go. His touch was warm, grounding, and for a moment, I allowed myself to lean into it. You make it sound so simple, I whispered, my voice cracking under the weight of my emotions. It's not, he admitted, his lips quirking into a small, bittersweet smile. But I'm willing to put in the work if it means I get another chance with you. I closed my eyes, torn between the rational part of me that screamed to walk away and the part that still yearned for the man standing before me. This doesn't mean I'm forgiving you, I said finally, opening my eyes to meet his gaze. I'm not asking for forgiveness, he said. Not yet. The air between us was charged, heavy with unspoken words and unresolved tension. But for tonight, just tonight, I allowed myself to set aside the pain, the doubts, and the fear. Then stay, I said, the words barely above a whisper. Taehyung's expression softened, a flicker of relief crossing his features as he nodded. I'll stay, and as he took my hand, pulling me back into his arms, I couldn't help but wonder if I was dancing too close to the flames. Taehyung's arms wrapped around me, strong yet gentle, as if he were afraid I might disappear if he held too tightly. The scent of his cologne, familiar and intoxicating, washed over me, bringing memories I'd tried to bury. The music had long since stopped, but we remained swaying in silence, caught in the gravity of our shared past. I wanted to pull away, to demand answers or set boundaries, but his warmth was a balm to wounds I didn't realize still ached. Do you remember the first time we danced like this? Taehyung murmured, his voice soft and wistful. I hesitated, not wanting to admit that I did. But the memory surfaced anyway. It had been at our wedding reception. The room had been filled with people, yet it had felt like it was just the two of us. He'd held me close, whispering promises I'd thought he'd keep forever. Don't, I whispered, pulling back enough to meet his gaze. Don't bring that up. Why not? He asked, his hands remaining on my waist. It was a good memory, wasn't it? A memory that doesn't matter anymore, I replied, my voice sharper than I intended. His jaw tightened, and he let out a slow breath. It matters to me, Jungkook. It always has, I wanted to scream at him, to tell him that if it had mattered so much, he wouldn't have left. But the vulnerability in his eyes stopped me. "Why now, Taehyung?" I asked, my voice softer but no less demanding. "Why come back after all this time?" He hesitated, his gaze dropping briefly before meeting mine again. "Because I couldn't stay away any longer. I thought I was doing the right thing by letting you go, but all I did was ruin both of us." I crossed my arms, creating a small barrier between us. "And what happens when you decide it's too hard again? What happens when you leave me?" "Again I won't," he said firmly, stepping closer. "I know I've broken your trust, and I don't expect you to believe me right away. But I'm not the same man who walked away. I've spent every day since regretting that decision, and I'm here to make it right." His words tugged at something deep inside me, but I couldn't let him see how much they affected me. "And what if I don't want you to?" I challenged, lifting my chin in defiance. "Then I'll still try," he said without hesitation. "Because you're worth it, Jungkook. You've always been worth it." My defenses wavered, and I hated how easily he could chip away at the walls I'd built. "This doesn't mean anything," I said, my voice trembling. "You can't just waltz back into my life and expect everything to go back to the way it was." "I don't want things to go back," he said, surprising me. "I want to build something new, better. But I need you to let me in." I looked away, my gaze falling to the floor as I struggled to make sense of my emotions. Part of me wanted to push him away, to protect myself from the heartbreak I knew he was capable of causing. But another part, the part that still remembered the love we'd shared, wanted to take the risk. "I don't know if I can do this," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. "You don't have to decide tonight," he said gently. "Just let me stay. Let me show you that I mean it this time." I sighed, running a hand through my hair as I wrestled with my conflicting feelings. "One night," I said finally. "But don't expect anything more." Taehyung smiled, a small, hopeful curve of his lips that made my chest ache. "That's all I'm asking for." As he reached out to take my hand again, I let him. For now, I would give him this chance. But in the back of my mind, the question lingered, was I setting myself up to get burned again? The night stretched on, quiet yet laden with unspoken tension. Taehyung hadn't let go of my hand since I'd agreed to let him stay. His touch was steady, grounding, and maddeningly familiar. It was dangerous. I sat on the edge of the sofa, my posture rigid as I watched him move around the room. He was too comfortable here, too at ease. Like he belonged, not just in this space, but in my life. "Do you want something to drink?" he asked, his voice gentle, almost tentative. "No," I replied quickly. "I'm fine." Taehyung paused, studying me with that unreadable gaze of his. It made my skin prickle, the intensity of his focus. He didn't press, though. Instead, he sat down across from me, leaving a respectful distance between us. "I meant what I said earlier," he began, his tone soft yet firm. "I'm not here to make things harder for you. I just want to be close to you again." "You say that like it's so simple," I said, my voice tinged with bitterness. "But it's not. You left me, Taehyung. You made that choice." He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "And I'll spend the rest of my life making up for it if you let me." I hated how sincere he sounded, how the vulnerability in his voice chipped away at my defenses. "You can't just," I started, but he cut me off. "I know I can't undo the past," he said. But I can start over. I can show you that I've changed, that I'm not the same man who hurt you. The weight of his words pressed down on me, making it hard to breathe. I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to believe him. But how could I trust someone who'd shattered me so completely? Why now, I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Why come back after all this time? Because I couldn't stay away, he admitted, his gaze unwavering. Every day without you felt wrong. I thought I was doing the right thing, but all I did was make us both miserable. I shook my head, unwilling to let myself fall into his orbit again. You don't get to decide what's best for me, Taehyung. You lost that right when you walked away. I know, he said, his voice soft yet resolute. But I'm here now, and I'm not going anywhere. Not unless you tell me to. The silence that followed was deafening, filled with all the things neither of us could say. I don't know if I can do this, I said finally, my voice trembling.